I met Marcus during my sophomore year at State University, when we were both working in the campus financial aid office. He was this quietly confident freshman who actually knew what he was doing with the filing systems. Unlike most of the work-study students who treated it like paid study time, there was something attractive about his competence. The way he'd methodically organize everything and actually care about helping the students who came in, stressed about their loan paperwork. While other guys were still figuring out how to do their own laundry, Marcus had this mature, stable energy that drew me in. We started dating after a few months of working together, and honestly, those early days were exactly what I thought I wanted. Marcus was thoughtful in ways that impressed me. He'd remember little things I mentioned, like how I preferred coffee from the place near the library, or that I had a big presentation coming up for my business class. When I was stressed about my course load, he'd bring me dinner and quiz me on my notes. He felt like a real partner, someone who was invested in my success and actually wanted to build something meaningful together. The relationship progressed naturally through college. Marcus was studying finance while I focused on business management, and we'd spend hours talking about our post-graduation plans. He had this vision of us both landing good entry-level positions and working our way up together. It felt romantic at the time. This idea of building a life from the ground up as a team. When he proposed during our senior year, after a year and a half of dating, it seemed like the perfect next step. We were both graduating in a few months. We'd proven we could support each other through the stress of school and work. And I genuinely believed we wanted the same things. The wedding was small but beautiful. Just 4 months after graduation, both our families got along well, and everyone seemed genuinely happy for us. Marcus had landed a position at a mid-sized accounting firm making $63,000 a year, while I started as a project coordinator at a consulting company for $58,000. The numbers felt so grown up and promising. We found this decent one-bedroom apartment about halfway between our offices. And for that first year, everything really was solid. I loved coming home to Marcus after long days at work. He'd usually beat me home and would have started dinner. And we'd sit at our little kitchen table talking about our days, our coworkers, our plans for the weekend. He was genuinely interested in the projects I was working on, and I appreciated how he'd listen to me vent about difficult clients or tight deadlines. When I got stressed, he'd rub my shoulders and remind me that I was great at my job and that the stress was temporary. It felt like we were really building something together, like we were this united front against the world. But somewhere during our second year of marriage, things started shifting in ways I didn't fully recognize at first. I'd been working incredibly hard at the consulting firm, staying late, taking on extra projects, really proving myself to the senior management. When they offered me a promotion to team lead with a bump to $76,000 a year, I was absolutely thrilled. This was exactly what I'd been working toward. Validation that my efforts were paying off and that I was on track for the kind of career growth I'd always envisioned. Marcus was genuinely excited for me when I told him about the promotion. He insisted on taking me out to dinner at this nice Italian place we'd been wanting to try. And he even surprised me with this beautiful silver necklace afterward. "I'm so proud of you," he kept saying, and at the time, I felt so grateful to have a husband who celebrated my success instead of feeling threatened by it. The promotion meant I was now out-earning him, but he seemed completely comfortable with that, which I appreciated. The new role meant working more closely with the senior staff, including this guy Adam who'd been with the company for about 3 years. Adam was smart, ambitious, and had this energy about him that I found immediately engaging. He'd been promoted twice since starting and was already making close to 6 figures. During our first team meeting, I was impressed by how articulately he presented his ideas and how the other senior staff clearly respected his input. Here was someone who really understood what it meant to be driven. As I settled into the team lead position, I started noticing things about Marcus that hadn't bothered me before. Or maybe I'd been too busy to pay attention to, like how he'd come home and immediately change into these old, comfortable clothes and settle in for the evening like he was done with any kind of ambition for the day. When I'd bring up ideas about maybe looking for a higher paying position, or ask if he'd considered talking to his boss about advancement opportunities, he'd give me these responses that started feeling frustratingly passive. "I'm happy where I am right now," he'd say, or "I think it's better to focus on doing my current job really well before thinking about the next step." These answers that had once seemed mature and thoughtful were starting to sound like excuses to me. I was watching my career accelerate while Marcus seemed content to just coast. The promotion also meant I was attending more networking events and company social functions. Marcus would come with me sometimes, And I started noticing how he'd fade into the background during conversations about career advancement or industry trends. When someone would ask him about his goals or what projects he was excited about, his answers were so modest, so small scale compared to the energy everyone else brought to these discussions. I found myself jumping in to redirect conversations or add context to his responses, trying to make him sound more ambitious than he was presenting himself. What Marcus means is that he's being strategic about his next move. I'd say, or he's really focused on developing his expertise before taking on bigger challenges. But even as I was trying to help, I was getting increasingly frustrated that I had to help at all. The differences became more obvious during social situations with my new colleagues. Adam and some of the other team leads would talk about their career strategies, the risks they were taking, the aggressive timelines they'd set for themselves. Meanwhile, Marcus would contribute these safe, conservative opinions that made him sound like he was already settling into middle management mediocrity at 28 years old. You need to learn how to speak with more authority, I told him after one particularly frustrating dinner party where he'd let Adam completely dominate a conversation about industry trends. When someone asks for your opinion, you can't start with, well, I might be wrong, but it makes you sound uncertain about everything. Marcus looked hurt by the feedback, which only frustrated me more. I was just trying to be respectful of other people's expertise, he said. But you have expertise too, I insisted. You just don't present it like you believe in yourself. These people respect confidence. If you don't advocate for your own ideas, no one else is going to do it for you. I thought I was helping him, pushing him to be more assertive and ambitious. But instead of stepping up, Marcus seemed to retreat even further into his passive approach to everything. When his annual review came around and he received what he described as solid feedback with a modest raise that brought him to $66,000, I couldn't hide my disappointment. Don't you think it's a little sad that you're still at that salary level after 3 years? I asked him that night. I mean, Adam started at 55 and he's already close to 100,000. What's the difference between you two? Marcus got defensive, which was becoming a pattern. Not everyone moves at the same pace. Jessica, I'm building experience and proving myself gradually, but that's exactly what I'm talking about. I said, this idea that you have to prove yourself gradually while other people are out there taking charge and making things happen. Maybe the problem isn't that you need more time. Maybe you're just not pushing hard enough. These conversations were happening more frequently, and I could see that Marcus was getting tired of them. But I couldn't understand why he wasn't more motivated by my feedback. I was succeeding in my career specifically because I was willing to be aggressive about advancement, to take risks and advocate for myself. Why couldn't he see that I was trying to help him apply those same strategies? The dynamic at home was shifting too. I'd come home energized from work, full of ideas and plans, and Marcus would be there in his comfortable routine, content with his modest progress and small goals. The contrast was becoming harder to ignore. When I'd suggest that maybe he should look at other companies, or consider going back for an MBA, or even just ask his boss about taking on more challenging projects, he'd give me these responses that sounded more like excuses than plans. Real men don't let their bosses punk them like that. I told him after he described a situation where his supervisor had passed him over for a project he'd expressed interest in. If you wanted that assignment, you should have made it clear that you were the right person for it. Instead, you just accepted their decision and moved on. I don't want to be pushy, Marcus said. I think it's better to build trust gradually and let my work speak for itself. But your work isn't speaking loudly enough, I said, and that's the whole problem. You're so worried about being polite and patient that you're letting opportunities pass you by. Maybe you're the problem. Maybe you're too soft. I could see that my words were hurting him. But I was getting genuinely frustrated with what felt like his refusal to take my advice seriously. Here I was, actually succeeding in my career, and he was dismissing my insights because they challenged his comfortable approach to everything. Meanwhile, my working relationship with Adam was becoming increasingly collaborative and energizing. We'd stay late working on project proposals, brainstorming strategies for client presentations, discussing long-term career goals. Adam had this way of engaging with ideas that made every conversation feel important and forward-thinking. He'd ask for my opinion on complex decisions and actually incorporate my suggestions into his approach. When I'd share my frustrations about industry challenges or difficult clients, he'd offer practical solutions and insights that helped me see situations from new angles. The contrast with my conversations at home was becoming impossible to ignore. With Adam, I felt intellectually stimulated and professionally valued. With Marcus, I felt like I was constantly having to drag him toward any kind of ambitious thinking. Adam would text me articles about industry trends or ideas for new business strategies. Marcus would text me asking if we needed milk from the grocery store. I started spending more time at work, partly because the projects were genuinely engaging, but also because the environment felt more aligned with my energy and goals. Adam and I would grab coffee in the afternoon to discuss client strategies, or work through lunch when we were developing presentations for senior management. These weren't romantic interactions, but they were intellectually intimate in a way that I was missing at home. I tried so hard for so long to respect you, Marcus, but I can't stand the fact that you settle for less than $100,000 a year. I finally told him one evening when he was describing his satisfaction with his recent performance review. We're almost 30 years old. This should be the time when we're really accelerating our careers, building towards something significant. Instead, you're celebrating staying exactly where you are. Marcus looked at me like I'd slapped him. Jessica, not everyone defines success the same way. I like my job. I'm good at it. And I'm building a stable foundation for our future. But what kind of future? I asked. A future where we're still living in a one-bedroom apartment when we're 40 because you were too comfortable to push for anything better. I'm trying to build something here. And I need a partner who's going to match my energy, not hold me back with dissatisfaction with mediocrity. That night, after Marcus had gone to bed, I found myself scrolling through my text conversations with Adam on our shared iPad. We'd been messaging more frequently about work projects, but the conversations had gradually become more personal. He'd ask about my weekend plans, share funny observations about office politics, send me encouraging messages when I was dealing with difficult clients. There was one message thread from earlier that week that I kept rereading. I'd been telling him about my frustration with Marcus's lack of ambition. And Adam had responded with this thoughtful analysis of different personality types and career motivations. Some people are builders and some people are maintainers. He'd written, neither is wrong, but builders need to be with other builders to really thrive. It sounds like you're a builder who's trying to motivate a maintainer, and that's probably exhausting for both of you. The insight felt so validating, so much more sophisticated than the defensive responses I got from Marcus whenever I tried to discuss our different approaches to career and life planning. Adam understood the frustration of being ambitious in a world full of people who were content with good enough. He got what it felt like to have big goals and the energy to pursue them. His most recent message was still open on the screen, and if only he knew how much you mean to me. Working with you has reminded me what it's like to be around someone who really gets it. I hope you know how rare that is. I was rereading those words when Marcus appeared in the doorway. I hadn't heard him get up. And when I looked up, he was staring at the iPad screen with this expression I'd never seen before. Not hurt, not angry, but something harder and more decisive. Jessica, we need to talk about Adam. My first reaction was annoyance, not guilt. Here was Marcus, finally showing some backbone. But it was about text messages instead of his own career. What about Adam? I think you know what about Adam, Marcus said. And his voice had this unfamiliar firmness to it. I just read through your conversations. This isn't just work collaboration. I could have denied it, or minimized it, or gotten defensive about his invasion of privacy. Instead, I felt this surge of clarity about what was really happening here. You're right, I said. It's not just work collaboration. It's not physical. It's emotional. But honestly, Marcus, I feel more seen by Adam than I felt in years with you. Marcus sat down across from me. And for a moment, I thought he was going to try to talk through this like all our other problems, with his patient, reasonable approach that never actually changed anything. Instead, he said something that surprised me. I want you to quit your job. Immediately. I actually laughed. Quit my job? Are you serious? Someone needs to pay the bills around here while you figure your life out. This isn't about money, Marcus said. This is about our marriage. If you want to save our marriage, you need to end whatever this is with Adam. And that means removing yourself from the situation entirely. The ultimatum was so unlike him that for a second, I wondered if this was what I'd been trying to get him to do all along. Take charge. Make demands. Act like he had some authority in his own life. But the timing was all wrong. And the demand was completely unreasonable. I'm not giving up my career because you're insecure about my friendship with a colleague. I told him, if you want to work on our marriage, then work on becoming the kind of husband I can actually respect. Stop trying to control me and start controlling your own life. Marcus looked at me for a long moment, and I could see something changing in his expression. Not the hurt or frustration I'd gotten used to seeing, but something colder and more final. Okay, he said quietly. I understand. The next morning, Marcus was gone before I woke up, which was unusual since he typically made coffee and left me a cup on the counter. When I got home from work that evening, there was an envelope on the kitchen table with my name on it. Inside were divorce papers and a note that said, "Since you can't respect our marriage, I'm ending it. You'll hear from my attorney." I was genuinely shocked by the swiftness of his action. This was the same man who took 6 months to decide on a new car, and he'd filed for divorce less than 24 hours after our confrontation. Part of me was almost impressed by the decisiveness, but mostly I was angry about the timing and the drama of it all. My first call was to Adam, who was sympathetic but also clearly uncomfortable with how quickly things were escalating. "Maybe you two should try counseling before making any permanent decisions," he suggested, which wasn't exactly the supportive response I was hoping for. Over the following weeks, as the divorce proceedings began, I kept expecting Marcus to calm down and approach this more rationally. Instead, he seemed to have transformed into this focused, strategic person I'd never seen before. His attorney was well prepared, organized, and had apparently advised him to document everything carefully. They had evidence of my emotional affair with Adam, including screenshots of our text conversations that went beyond anything I'd realized Marcus had access to. They presented a timeline showing how my behavior toward Marcus had deteriorated over the past year, including testimony from friends who'd witnessed me talking over him and making disparaging comments about his career. I tried to explain to the mediator that I'd been trying to motivate Marcus to help him reach his potential, but the way they framed it made me sound controlling and disrespectful. When I described my friendship with Adam as emotional support during a difficult period in my marriage, they made it sound like I'd been planning to leave Marcus for another man. The most frustrating part was watching Marcus during these proceedings. He was calm, prepared, and articulate in a way that he'd never been during our arguments at home. This was the authoritative energy I'd been trying to get him to show for years, and he was finally displaying it in service of ending our marriage. The final settlement awarded Marcus 55% of our joint savings account, which I thought was excessive given that I'd been contributing more to it over the past 2 years. And the judge also ruled that neither of us would pay alimony, which was probably fair, but still felt like a punishment for my higher earning potential. When the divorce was finalized, I felt this mixture of relief and vindication. I'd kept my job, my independence, and my self-respect. Marcus had gotten his dramatic exit, and now we could both move on with our lives. I'd proven that I wasn't going to be controlled or manipulated into giving up my career for someone else's insecurity. About a week later, I was having lunch with some colleagues when I saw Marcus's friend Carl approaching our table. Carl worked in our company's finance department, and I'd always found him a bit awkward and intrusive. He asked if he could speak with me privately, and reluctantly, I followed him to a quieter corner of the restaurant. "I probably shouldn't be telling you this," Carl said, "but I think Marcus should know about the bonus you received last month. The $42,000 performance bonus that came through right before your divorce was finalized." My stomach dropped. I'd been so careful about timing, and the bonus had been processed just days after our final court date. Technically, it was post-divorce income, and I hadn't seen any reason to complicate the settlement by bringing it up. "That's none of Marcus's business," I told Carl. "Our financial obligations to each other ended when the divorce was finalized." "But you earned that bonus during your marriage?" Carl said. "The work you did to earn it happened while you were still married to him. I think a court might see it differently than you do." 2 days later, I received a call from Marcus's attorney. They were filing a motion to reopen the case based on undisclosed assets. Apparently, Carl had provided them with documentation showing that my bonus had been approved and earned during the marriage, even though it was paid out afterward. I hired my own attorney to fight the motion, arguing that post-divorce income shouldn't be subject to division, but the forensic accountant they brought in made a compelling case that I'd deliberately hidden a significant asset during the proceedings. The judge was clearly not pleased with what looked like an attempt to defraud the court. The ruling required me to pay Marcus 50% of the bonus, $21,000, plus his legal fees for the motion, which came to about $3,000 more. In total, I had to write Marcus a check for $24,000, money that I'd been counting on to establish my post-divorce financial independence. After the hearing, Marcus and I ended up in the courthouse hallway at the same time, waiting for our respective attorneys to finish up some paperwork. It was the first time we'd been alone together since the night I'd confronted him about the divorce papers. "You really think this makes you a man?" I asked him, taking my money like some bitter ex-husband. Marcus looked at me with that same calm, decisive energy he'd been showing throughout the divorce proceedings. No. What makes me a man is standing up to someone who thought she could walk all over me and get away with it. The response was so direct, so final, that I didn't have anything to say back. This wasn't the passive, accommodating Marcus I'd been married to. This was someone who'd apparently learned how to set boundaries and enforce consequences, skills I'd been trying to teach him for years that he was now using against me. That was the last conversation we ever had. Over the following months, I occasionally heard updates about Marcus through mutual friends. He'd gotten a promotion at work and was apparently making close to 6 figures now. He'd moved to a nicer apartment closer to his office. People said he seemed happier, more confident, more social than he'd been during our marriage. A few months after the final settlement, I sent Marcus an email. I'd been thinking about everything that had happened, and I wanted to offer some closure, maybe explain my perspective on what had gone wrong between us. I spent a long time crafting the message, trying to strike the right tone of accountability while also helping him understand my motivations. I never got a response. Looking back now, I can see that I was probably too hard on Marcus during our marriage. My intentions were good. I wanted both of us to reach our potential, to build something significant together. But maybe my approach was counterproductive. I was trying to motivate him the same way I motivated myself, with high expectations and direct feedback, but people respond differently to different kinds of encouragement. The thing is, everything I said about his career turned out to be accurate. He was settling for less than he was capable of, and he did need to be more assertive about advancement. The fact that he achieved those goals after our divorce just proves that he had the potential all along. If he had just been willing to listen to my advice and apply it during our marriage, we might have been able to build the successful partnership I'd envisioned. Instead, he chose to see my feedback as criticism rather than support, as my ambition as a threat rather than an inspiration. When I found emotional connection with someone who shared my drive and understood my frustrations, Marcus made it about infidelity instead of addressing the underlying problems that had led to our disconnect. The divorce, the legal battles, the financial penalties. All of that could have been avoided if Marcus had been willing to work on himself instead of just giving up on us. I tried so hard to help him become the man I knew he could be. But ultimately, people have to want to change. You can't force someone to be ambitious if they're comfortable with mediocrity. I'm doing fine now. My career has continued to advance, and I've learned to be more selective about the kind of partner I'd want to build a life with. Someone who shares my values around success and growth, who doesn't need constant encouragement to pursue their goals. Marcus and I simply weren't compatible in that way, and it's probably better for both of us that we figured that out when we did. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Marcus had shown that decisive, authoritative energy during our marriage instead of saving it for the divorce proceedings. If he'd been willing to take charge of his career the way he took charge of ending our relationship, we might have had the partnership I was trying to create. But you can't build a future with someone who's only willing to fight for what they're losing, not for what they could be gaining.